Hello everyone, welcome to another tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to be making some smooth concrete tiles, as you can see here. I had an itch to make some tiles with a smooth, almost wet kind of look, or moist. So just to give you guys a close-up or an overview of what we're going to be working on here is obviously we have these tiles, but more closely we do have like some little indents or sockets where we're going to have bolts kind of holding these concrete tiles down. We're gonna have like these arrows pointing towards the corners for whoever was laying these down. They know where to orient them. We do have some cracks. These are very specific cracks to concrete. We also have these little like freckles on the surface of the concrete. And then we have, we're gonna get a good angle of this, some surface noise, but it's kind of hard to tell on this one. Let me see if I can find another one. Yeah, so we have like a little bit of surface noise as well. Okay, so yeah, this is what we're going to be doing, and let's get right into it. So if we look here, this is the main graph. You can if you are working here and you want to get an overview of your graph, you can press F, and it'll focus on the entirety of the graph. So I want to take a different approach with this tutorial because I think some of these tutorials are kind of long. I want to find a way to shorten them. So the new approach I want to take is I want to just work on the original. So this is the original that I made. And I'm going to disable everything. And we're just going to enable the blend modes as we go. That way I don't take up time connecting things and, messing up and looking where the connections are. And because I think that's a lot of time wasted. So I'm going to pause and I'm going to disable everything. And then we're going to go one step at a time. Be right back. Oh, I forgot to mention. When I made this graph, I did make it. I started in 2K, and then like about halfway through, I switched to 4K resolution for this texture. You can follow along in 2, and then just turn on 4K later on. But let's say you're like making your own changes. If you go between 2K and 4K, your texture will look a little bit different, just because all the noises and all the textures you'll be using will have a little bit more like resolution. So things might change a little bit. So if you do plan on working on 4K, but you can go between 2K and 4K, because sometimes my computer will slow down in 4K, so I'll switch back and forth and stuff. But yeah, just a heads up on that. I am working in 4K. You can follow along in 2K. It's not a problem. But if you notice some things are looking different, that'll be why. Okay. Oh, and we do have a boolean here for our puddles, where we have like a dry version or dryish and a puddle version. And then we even have a like if you don't want the puddles, we can do like a just kind of like a moist, where we can disable the puddles but keep like the wet spots. But more about that when we get to it. All right, be right back. All right, we're back. So I've just unplugged base color and roughness, since that's going to be for the other parts. And then for the height, I've unplugged or disabled all the blends. So this is what the default is. So just like all our tutorials, we have just move this down a bit. We have a levels here, a levels holding it down. And then from that, it goes into the normal and the ambient occlusion. We're doing HBAO. And then plug those in, obviously, respectively, into their slots that they belong to. So the levels go straight into the height, the normal goes straight into the normal, and the ambient occlusion straight into the ambient occlusion. And then the settings for these guys, 0.005 for the height depth. The levels is just the default stock levels, so nothing's changed here. And the normal I have it set to 10, and I am using DirectX, and I'm using the roughness workflow, not glossy. And then don't worry about this stuff. Just plug the normal directly into the normal output, and we'll touch on this, later on. That should be it. And then metallic I have unplugged as well because there's a little bit of metallic on this texture. Nothing crazy. Okay, so let's get pumped and let's get started. So just for the sake of this, I just plugged in a shape into my main road here, but I'm gonna plug in this guy and let's get started with a tile sampler here. So like I said, I'm gonna leave everything plugged in and I'm just gonna walk you guys through everything and enable these as we go through. So for the tile sampler, I meant to get rid of this. All right, 1 second. Actually, on second thought, we're just gonna leave it. Just note that my X and my Y is 4x4. So whenever we use a tile sampler, or when we use a, because we do use a tile generator, just make sure it's set to 4x and 4 on the Y. We're never going to deviate from that. Okay, so we have a tile sampler, 4x4, pattern square. Everything here in size is the same. Everything in position is the same. Everything in rotation is the same. And by the same, I mean like default. The only thing different is the color random. We set that to 1 so that we get this grayscale value. Otherwise, it's going to look like this. Also, I've changed my size to 2K because I'm like recording and I don't want it to like slow down, but maybe I'll switch to 4K as we go on. But yeah, you can work on 4K. You can follow along in 4K too. It's not a big deal. If your computer can handle it. All right. So that's it for the tile sampler, and then we go into an auto levels just to make sure. This is just something I do all the time, where I want to make sure I get the full range. You can see that there's a difference. So I want to get the full range of 0 and 1. So then that gives us this here. And then we use an edge detect. Now, if you want to give some rounded corners to your tiles, you can use the edge roundness here, like that. Now, I didn't want that, but that's where that is. So then this right here is the pattern shape. And if we weren't doing the bolts or the screws and stuff, then you could change the pattern here and do like rectangles or like brick size and stuff. But because I'm using, the indents and they're specific for the 4x4 or square tiles, I guess, then they kind of have to remain the same. Okay, so before we go here, we're gonna go down here into Floodfill City, which is where all the Floodfill stuff is. And I'm just gonna double click everything here so they load. So from the pattern shape, we're gonna go directly into the Floodfill. Pretty standard. Then from the Floodfill, we need a Floodfill to random color. We need a Floodfill to random grayscale and a Floodfill to gradient. And then set up 3 distance nodes afterwards. And the Floodfill will go into the bottom slot of these distance nodes. And then on the top slot is going to be this guy, the pattern shape. That's going to go into the top of the distances. And then set the maximum distance for all the distances to 5,000, just to make sure that we're pushing the pixels all the way into the nearest one. Let me just click these. And then I have my angle variation on the Floodfill to gradient set to 1. And then just, in Snow Penguin fashion, I just have auto levels at the end of these to make sure that I'm getting the full range. If you want to see if you're getting the full range of things, you can always summon in a levels node and then hit this levels button, because this button is basically an auto levels node. You just hit that and it'll auto level. And then if you see changes, if this thing is in 0 and 1, then you know that you did not have the full range. But now when you bring in a levels and then you hit the auto levels again, you'll see that it's 0 and 1, because obviously the auto levels is doing what that button does. Okay, so once you have this set up, we are going to back away from that and come back up here. So now that we have that taken care of, we're going to move on to the edge roundness. So let's get close and let's just turn this on and you'll see what it's doing. It's giving us like a rounded edge on the tiles. Now from the pattern shape, we are going to do a blur grayscale, high quality grayscale. It's going to be 0.25 with a quality of 1. And then we have a levels below it. And the level out high is 0.5. And then that's going to go into a screen blend. And we've done this in previous tutorials. And then we're going to feed that into a multiply blend. Now before we move on, we're going to go back down into the noises. Now since I was working in 4K, I wanted to keep the graph as light as possible. So you should reuse noises instead of spawning a new noise every single time. So let's set these up. So we have clouds 2, and these are all into auto levels. Again, just to make sure we're using the full scale. So we have a clouds 2. We have a Perlin noise, a clouds 2 with a scale of 2. A Perlin noise with a scale of 8. A fractal sum base with a roughness of 2. And a max level of 11. We have a moisture noise. Standard one. And then we have a black and white spots 2 set to the default. So these are all the noises we're going to be working with. So now that we have that set up, you can probably just make highways or the connectors all the way down and then just pull from it as you need. And you can fix the straightness as you go. Okay, so from the clouds 2, from the auto levels, from the clouds 2, just pull up and create a sharpen. And as usual, I always space. I have a space of 2 by 2 in between everything, just to help myself stay organized. So put that into a sharpen, set to 0.5. Actually, let's turn this on first. So you can see the edge wear there. And so the sharpen will go into a vector warp grayscale. All my vector warp grayscales are always set to 10. And this is just to break up the noise based on the tiles so that the noise doesn't carry over from one to the other. That vector warp is going into a slope blur. And here we're using min mode. And that the top input is coming from this. Then here we have a multiply. Now here I'm using this guy because this is like the original shape, the pattern shape. So before it connects into here, I split it and I have this top connection here or road. So that I pull from the pattern shape into the top here to multiply, because the slope blur here is having my tile spill a little bit into the in-between. And then I use the original pattern to clean it up because I'm multiplying the black out so that I'm left with the original bounds of the tile. Okay, so then we have edge wear again, but this is the large edge wear here. So then you can see the difference. So for this one, I take the sharpened, what was it, Clouds 2? Yeah, the Clouds 2 from earlier, the sharpened one, I pull from that into a transform, and I increase the tiling, and I rotate it. Did I rotate it? Yeah. I rotate it 90 degrees usually, and if I use this noise again, I'll rotate it another 90 degrees. That way we're still using the same noise, but we're rotating it, so it's going to affect everything differently than the other one without having to create an entirely new noise or change the seed. Okay, so then that's going into a vector warp again. And every time we do a vector warp grayscale, I don't think I showed it for this guy. Every time we use a vector warp grayscale, we're using an intensity of 10, and we're pulling from this distance. This flood fill random the color with the distance turned all the way up. So you can continue this orange highway all the way down because we're going to be using it often. So every time you see a vector, it's coming from this guy, the only orange guy down there. So then we're doing a slope blur again, and we're connecting the top with the whatever comes after the edgeware minor. And then again, we're multiplying with the original pattern like we did before. And then here we have I don't know if I showed this guy, but yeah, for this blend, it's 0.4 and it's just a copy. Because I didn't want the full effect of the slope blur. And then same thing here, we're using a copy and we're doing 0.25. And the more of this you allow, the deeper it's going to go down. And I didn't want the edgeware to be that deep. I kind of just wanted it to be like a shallow on the edges. So you can see the difference there. So 0.25 for that. And now we're going to add the sockets, or what I call sockets or indents. So let's turn that on. So then you can see them there. And then we're going to start with a shape. And then we're going to make it a small rectangle. You can see the settings there. Then I do an edge detect to kind of give it a curve. So now that I have my curve, I can multiply this initial black to get rid of this extra white up here that I don't want. And then we get this. And then I move it into place. And you can see I offset it by 0.5 because I want the other half to spill to the bottom. So I'm using the seamlessness to our advantage. And then I use another transform 2D to move it. Now you could move it in here as well to the left, but I like to do, for most cases, I like to have a different transform 2D for each movement. That way, if I need to nudge it, I don't have to like worry about all the other changes, and I can just find the transform 2D where I made that move, and then just worry about that one. So then this one moves it up, and then this one moves it to the left. And then here we use a mirror grayscale to mirror it back to the right side. So now we have two, because we are doing like two on each side. And then I do a transform 2D to rotate it 90 degrees. So then we have these two. So we have the top and the sides. So then we just add them together. And then we use a bevel here to kind of give it like a smooth transition. And then we plug that bevel into a tile generator, which is basically like a tile sampler, but a little cheaper with less options. And again, this is set to 4x4. Now I made it a parameter because I wanted to be able to change this. So if we go to like, I don't know, let's try 6x6. Let's see if it works. Yeah, so if we do 6x6, all my tile generators are set to the same parameter. So when I make a change to tile amount, it's going to change it on all my tile generators. So then we're able to get the pattern on all of them. If I hadn't set that, then I would have to make sure all my tile generators have the same value, and I would have to like manually input them every time. And if I want to switch back and forth, there would be an issue. But luckily I set that up. So if you guys want to set that up, if you have, I'm just gonna spawn in a quick tile sampler here. Just click this button up here, and then go to expose as new graph input, and then call this like or this is the identifier, so it doesn't matter. And then just right here, tile. Obviously, don't put tutorial. I'm just doing that because I already have one named after tile amount. And then minimum, obviously, it's going to be 4x4. Actually, you could do 3x3. Let's try that. That'll be our minimum, and then our maximum, I don't know, we'll say 12. And then we can hit OK. So then you'll see that the X will turn blue. Now, you always want your X to equal your Y and your Y to equal your X. So I'm going to just hit this drop down again, and I'm just going to choose, I think this is the new one I just made, so call that. So then when you double click outside here, you'll see tile tutorial amount. And now your X and Y will be synced together because obviously you don't want to make rectangles, so you always want them to equal each other. And then the minimum is 3. You can't go any lower than that. I guess my maximum isn't working, but yeah, you want your X and your Y to equal each other, and that's how you do a separate parameter. So that's what I did. And then every time you spawn in a new generator, just make sure you click here, and then you choose the one that you made so that it pulls from the same input. All right, we finished this. Whoops, we finished this. So now we're doing the sockets, right? We were right here. So for the tile generator, all I did was change this to the one I made originally. That way it knows it's 4x4. And I think that's the only thing. Everything else stays the same. We're just using this to have it sample our sockets, everywhere where we need it. Then we have a transform 2D, and this is pulling from also the clouds too. And then again, I rotate it again. I'm pretty sure. If I didn't, I should have. That goes into a slope blur scale. This one's set to max because we're going to be subtracting. So I want the edge wear to push outward because it's then going to show up here. See, this is out. You have to think of it like in the reverse. And then that's going into a copy here with 0.5 because I didn't want the full effect. I want some of it. And then we go through a levels here, 0.4. And then we go into socket thingy here. Set to subtract because we're subtracting this. And this is where you can determine how deep the socket it's going. So I have it set to here because later on in the graph, I squish everything because I don't want the tiles to be this thick. And you'll see what I mean later. Okay, now after socket thingy, we have socket holes. So if we turn that on, that'll be these guys here. Now, we start with a shape. We're going to go through the top first and then the bottom. We start with a shape. Then we do a transform 2D. And here we move it up. So it's just the Y we're worried about. Then we do another transform 2D. Again, this one's to move it to the left. Like I said, you could probably do these both in one transform to save yourself some nodes. But they're very cheap, so I don't mind. Then we do a mirror grayscale again. Same process as before, just to try and get them in place. Another mirror grayscale. A transform 2D, rotated 90 degrees. Then we add them together. Then I do a slight bevel. Let's see if I can turn this up to 4K now. Alright, and I probably should turn up the, oh, we're working with a height scale of 1, and tessellation factor, you can do whatever you like. I'm going to move this up to 6 so you can get more resolution on there. Alright, where do we leave off? The bevel. So then we bevel it. Actually, I'm just going to hide the other stuff. Okay, there we go. That's what we're working on right now. And then we do our levels here, and this is going to dictate how deep it is. And this is where the screws are going to go. So this is 0.25 after the bevel. And then we have our blend mode here set to add. And then we have a tile generator, again, set to 4x4, or if you set up your own parameter, choose that one. Everything else should be the same. Now let's go to the bottom, because now we're adding the hole within the hole. So we need to go here. Wait, nope. Oh yeah, this is where we're at. Sorry about that. We start with a shape, set to disk, same as here. Transform 2D, it's just a repeat of above. Boom, boom, boom. We mirror it again, rotate it, add it. Now here I blur, instead of bevel, I blur it a little bit. And then I do the height thing. And then I add it. And then it looks like this because we're going to be subtracting. So it's this middle stuff is going to subtract deeper than this stuff. That's why there's two different shades of gray basically. And then again, like I said, tile generator. And then we subtract. So that you can see the difference here being shown here. Now here is the screws being screwed in. So I'm going to show that. And you see it looks a little weird. And that's like I said, because later on in my graph, I lower the tiles. So if I turn this on, they look better. So you should just, you guys should add this levels node at the end of whatever you're working and then move it down till you get to this point. That way you're not working with this. Unless you don't mind, then you can just keep following, but you can add this now and then just move it along. And this is set to, let's just round this up to 0.36. There you go. That way it looks like that. Now I'm going to turn it off just in case you don't do it. Actually, I'll just leave it on. So yeah, I don't add it till after this concrete noise, but you can add it now and then just keep moving it down the line till we get to this part. I don't know why that's here. I think I was testing something earlier. Okay, right, the screws. So then this blend mode is set to max lighten, and let's go through the screws. Start with a shape. I started here with a hemisphere pattern, and then that goes into a blend mode set to subtract with the shape in the middle. And then we do another shape. This is going to be the screw pattern thingy. Same thing, we rotate 90 degrees. We add them together to get a cross or a plus sign. Then I have another shape here. This is to make the inside of it. So I make a small shape. I rotate it here 45 degrees. I set my filtering to nearest. Keep an eye on this, because I think by default it'll be set to bilinear. And the reason why I set it to nearest is because if you rotate it, because of what do you call this? There's a name for this. There's a name for this. Oh God, what is it? Let me think about it. Is it like anti-aliasing or something? Oh God, this is a long time. Yeah, so it can't do a straight line because of pixels, so it gives us like this stepping effect. But if we set it to nearest, then it's gonna try its best to just do a binary set of steps instead of and that's because obviously it's easy to do a straight edge when they're sitting flat, but obviously when they're angled, you know, you need to set this to nearest. Now I think I do that actually for a lot of these. So hopefully it was, yeah, see like these guys. So I hope that was in range when I was going through. But even if you don't change it, it's not that big a deal. Alright. So then here we add it. We add the cross with our 45-degree rotated square to get this. Then I bevel inward. And then I lower it because obviously we're going to subtract from the original hemisphere, or yeah, hemisphere pattern shape. 0.5 because I don't want it to go all the way down. And then if you want it, this is where you would dictate the, you know, how deep it's going. I'm going to stick with my value. Then we do, oh, I scale it down a little bit. So we go from this bigger one to the smaller one. Instead of going back here and changing all these scales, I just decided to do it all at once. This one you don't want to change because you want to keep this gradient. Actually, what would happen if we did this? Yeah, don't do it. I don't know, it's doing some weird stuff. Yeah, you only want that when you're working with, or at least I only do it when I'm working with, like if I need a black or white. Okay, let me change my music here. All right. Okay, so yeah, so here we scaled it down a little bit by 1/8. Then we move it up. Now, if you notice, these are all using the kind of similar offsets, if not the same, because they need to kind of all stack together. Mirror, mirror again, rotate, same thing we've done. We add. Now here, I do a scan and I change the position all the way up to 1. And then I lower it, as I've done in previous tutorials. This is what we had. Now you can see that the screw is reaching all the way down to the bottom. And if we don't do this step here, it's going to look like that. But I scan the screw to get the maximum area or bounds of the screw. And then I basically screen it. And it's a way of adding to it. If we change this to add, you'll see that all the information is kind of gone because it's like, it's adding what's below it and what's on top together. But with screen, it's only adding certain values. You guys should go check out Johnny M's channel where he goes over all the blend modes. If you look at my first tutorial, there's a link to them, and I think there's a link to them in one of my recent tutorials. I don't know. I think it's the sci-fi grades or the office ceiling. It's in there. But yeah, his name is Johnny M. He does Substance Designer tutorials. All right. Okay, so we use screen and we bring up the range so that they're not going all the way down to the bottom. Then tile generator, don't forget to change your thing, or just set it to 4x4. All right, what's going on here? Okay, shenanigans. So then after the tile generator, we're going to do a scan, set to 1 again. Okay, I know what this is for. This is so that you can hide some screws if you want, just some extra flavor. So then now that we have a white and black, we can do a flood fill. And then we do a flood fill to random grayscale. And then I do an auto levels as usual. And then from that, I do another histogram scan. And I set them both to 1, 1. And then I multiply that. So now I call this histogram scan here screw amount because if you lower the position, you'll see these guys, the screws, start to disappear and leave behind the socket. So if you wanted to do like a beat up version or maybe have like some missing screws, you could do that. I left them all on, but just some extra flavor. Let's just turn that back up to 1. And then that will multiply into this. If you don't want to have the missing screws, you could probably just plug this generator into the levels and ignore all of this, but we'll just leave it. So then that multiplies by the generator, and then we have a levels here. This level I left the same. But if you wanted to lower them, you could do so here. But I left it at 1. And then we have max lighting like we said before. And max lighting is easy to explain. Basically what it does is if you have a higher value than the pixel below it, then it's going to go on top. So for example, these pixels are higher value than these pixels here. So with max lighting, they'll show up on top. If I change this to add, then it's going to add what's below it with what's on top of it, and it's going to give us this monstrosity, which maybe you want. But it's adding this value right here is adding with this value and giving you this. And the reason why there's nothing here is because it's adding this value with this value, and anything plus 0 equals the original value. So that way, that's why here it stays the same. And then here it's higher because it's adding this bottom stuff with this stuff. And that's obviously going to reach 1, which is the maximum threshold. Okay, enough explaining. That's not what this is about. Or for blend types at least. Obviously that's what the tutorial is for. Alright, and then here we have the pointy sockets. Oh, okay, these are the corner guys. I should call them corner sockets, but... Alright, so that's these guys. So similar to the original sockets, the screw sockets that we added. To make a triangle, I went off the deep end. Oh yeah, we haven't been using any of these guys, so I was like wondering if we're going to use them. I guess we do here. Alright, so yeah, so I did it a weird way. There's many ways to make triangles. This is the way I chose. So I started with the shape, with a default shape. And then I did a what's it called? A transform 2D. I rotated it 45 degrees. I changed my filtering to nearest. And then I moved it. I offset it halfway. And then obviously because it was rotated, and then I squished it a bit, and then that gives me this perfect triangle, this 90-degree triangle here. And then, oh, change your tiling mode to no tiling, otherwise you're going to tile. Yeah, you have to make sure you're using no tiling. And then here we scale it down. And then I do an edge detect to kind of give it some rounded corners. Same thing, we multiply with the original to get this. And then we do another transform 2D where we scale it down. And then I use another transform 2D to move it into place. And then here we do a histogram scan to get rid of this stuff. Sometimes changing this doesn't get rid of it as well as you would want. So you can always do so with a histogram scan. Now you do notice you do get some improper stepping, but you know, it's not much we can do about that. But it's not going to be noticeable because it's so tiny. Then we mirror it to the left. Then we mirror it to the top. Like so. Then again, we bevel it. And then we tile generator it. Again, 4x4, or change to your parameter. And then we do a slope blur. And the reason why I did the slope blur after the generator is if I do the slope blur here, you could, but then every single set of these corners for your tiles will look the same because they're all coming from this guy. But if you slope blur after, then all of these guys are going to look a little different. They're all going to have like a different edge wear. So then here we'll transform 2D into a sharpen into the bottom of the slope blur, into a copy again, just half of the damage. Now here we're using 0.5 sharpen, and then here we have a rotated version of the Clouds 2 again, because we're using the same edge wear noise that we've been doing for all our edge wear. We don't want our edge wear to suddenly look different or more smooth or rounded. So then once we're here, we do the blend, then this goes into a levels set to 0.2. And then this is where we subtract those guys, and this is obviously where you set your how deep you want it. And then we have our concrete noise. Don't worry about this stuff yet. We're gonna come to it when we need to. I know you're probably wondering like, oh, what's that down there? That's coming up soon. So then this is where we add our surface noise. So if we look here, we're adding some bumpiness, or I guess not bumpiness, the opposite of bumpiness. And then here, we're taking a histogram scan, but first we're going to pull from, wait, I lost it. Let's do that. We're pulling from a fractal sum base. So it's this guy's turn. That's going into a histogram scan set to 0.28, into a multiply. And we are multiplying the Perlin noise. Is going on top. So that we go from this to this, because I want the noise to be varying. I don't want them all to be at the same height. We do a vector warp 10, and obviously that's coming from the only orange road that we have. And then here we play around with the levels. And then that goes into the top, into the foreground of the blend. And then the blend is set to subtract at 0.0025. Because obviously I want it to be very, 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 very minimal. Otherwise it's going to look like this. And obviously it's not what we want. Now if you notice, actually let's go back there. If you notice, this noise is not in here or anywhere on this. And that's what we're going to do next. Because if you notice, we do have something into our opacity. And that's this, telling it, hey, don't subtract, only subtract where it is white. Anywhere where it's not white, do not subtract. And honestly, we don't really mind this because there's nothing there. But we could fix that as well. Let's see if we can. So to get this mask, now that's what this next thing that I just mentioned is for. So we're going to go back all the way to edgeware minor. We're going to pull from the slope blur into an invert. And it's going to give us just the edgeware here. And then that's going to go directly into an add. And then we're going to add the tile generator from socket thingy. And then we're going to add. So now we have the socket and the edgeware added together. And then we're going to continue that connection under all of these stuff. So this is like the sewer into another add. And then here we're adding from the from this blend, which is after the tile generator and the slope blur. So here, actually, I think I just noticed something. Yeah, for this one, I should have pulled from here. Sorry about that. Yeah, because I do want to catch the edge wear. Because before I was pulling from here, which is just the socket, but I do want to make sure I'm catching the edge wear. Because the thinking here is that the surface is only on the surface, and then this edge wear chipped on the surface, so you wouldn't see that surface noisiness where it's chipped. So we want to make sure we catch that. I think we were here. Yeah, so then we add here. Yep. And then here we do another add, but this time we add the pointy boys. So then we have the sockets, the pointy, and then the edge wear. And then we do a histogram scan and we change it to 1 so that we get the full range. Now this stuff is okay. It's not a big deal. Just leave the contrast. Let me just leave contrast all the way up. And now that we have that, that can go into an invert grayscale. So this road continues on because we'll use it again. But here it'll split. This is where the concrete noise was. So then here we invert it because this is what we want to use. This is the mask we want to use to tell this thing, hey, only do it in the white. So then once we invert it, I do a blur with 0.25. And the reason for this blur is because, let's say, I'm going to turn this up. And I'm going to disable this blur. And you can see here that the mask is pretty harsh, right? Because the mask here is pretty much black or white. Now I want that to fade in instead. I don't want it to be that harsh. So I add a blur here so that the transition is smoother. So let's go back to the original. I think it was this. Yeah, that way the noise kind of this stops like around here because it's going to fade in and not be here. All right. And then this is where we lower the tiles. We should already have this. And if you didn't, add it then. You can add it now. So everything should look a little better after that. And then here where we add the concrete freckles, which is these guys. We start with a dirt 2. Then we have a transform 2D where we increase the tiling by 2. And then in the top, the dirt scan, we do a scan with 0.05. And then for the bottom, we do a dirt scan of 0.2. And then I do an add linear dodge. Then actually this should probably be a lion. Then we do a multiply. And we multiply by this Perlin noise again. Wait. Yeah, right here. So then that Perlin noise again will go on top here. And we'll multiply to kind of break it up again. So we go from this to this. Because I don't want all the freckles to be at the same elevation. I want some freckles to cut deeper than others. So you can see that these are shallower than these guys. Yeah, because if I disable this, you can see that a lot of them are very deep. And then we do a vector warp grayscale set to 10, obviously from the only orange road. Then here we have a blend mode set to subtract. And we are subtracting this guy, this mask, from the freckles so that we get no freckles there, because again, they're just for the surface. And then this is going to a level because it's going to dictate the height or how deep the freckles are. Obviously, we don't want it to be that super deep. And that's 0.1. And then after that, I think this is the almost to the end. So now we have the concrete cracks. Let's see if we can find them. Where are they at? Okay, so there's some right there. Now these are very, very, very shallow. They're not very deep. And what I did here was create a tile generator, set to 5x5. I used a square pattern. I changed the scale to 0.05. And then the other thing I did was change the rotation random all the way up, the offset to 0.5, the offset random to 1, and the luminance random to 1. Then I used a distance node set to 5,000 with the tile generator going to the bottom and the histogram scan going to the top. To get this, then I do an edge detect to get it's an edge detect with the invert turned on. So by default, it'll look like this. So I invert it so that I work with the lines. Or you could do an edge detect and then do an invert grayscale afterwards to get the same result. But the edge detect has like a built-in invert grayscale, so I just use that sometimes to save on notes. That goes into a non-uniform directional warp grayscale. And then we have, actually I should have made this its own thing down here, but it's okay. Because I think I only use this for this anyways. So we have a crystals 1 here with a scale of 20. And then we do an auto levels for penguin reasons. Then we do a blur. Then we feed that blurred crystal once into the intensity input to get the jaggedness going. So we go from this to this, and we have a intensity of 5 into the settings. And then here I rotate the crystal 1 90 degrees and I move it randomly. So these are the random values here. And then again, I plug that back into the intensity and then I do some more warping in another direction. You don't want to keep using the same direction or it's going to be less and less noticeable. So here it's pointing towards 0 degrees and then here it's pointing towards 9 degrees. So I'm pushing to the left and then I'm pushing to the top. Then here I do a normal directional warp. Again, pushing towards 0. Again, here I rotate 90 degrees and then I move I move it around. I move the noise around. Then I do another directional warp. Again, we're just trying to get less and less straight lines. Again, here I increase the tiling by 2. And I move it some more. And then we do that one last time. Now what I did here was actually I changed the resolution on this guy, -3 and -3, to get myself a more noisy noise. And then set to 9 degrees, 2.5. And then here I used a bevel. I'm just going to do an auto load to show you what it's doing here. Oh, this is the bright one right there. Okay, so what's happening here is I'm beveling and I'm kind of creating a actually I wonder if I should do this instead. Do a scan, set to 1, then bevel it. You could do that. I'm just gonna leave it to what I did before. So we have a bevel here. So then we go from this, which is mostly just flat in the middle, and then we kind of create like a bubble effect towards it, towards the middle. And then I didn't want these cracks to all be at the same height, so I used a scan. And again, it's very shallow, so it's kind of hard to tell in here. Ooh, this guy should definitely not be its own thing. This guy should be coming from this clouds too, so don't be like me. Follow your clouds 2 highway, and that should connect in there. Save yourself some notes. Okay. This slope blur is set to 32, mode max, and then again a copy. So then we go from this to this, and that's how we get like these this effect where it's kind of like fading outward. Oh, what was the actually? Let me go back. What was the scale on that clouds too? Okay, 1. Okay, that's good. Yeah, because I think this clouds. Wait, what's this clouds 2 set to? Oh, okay. No, this clouds 2 is set to a scale of 2, and we need one set to a scale of 1. So I think that's why I had it there. I knew old me is never wrong. So let's actually bring that clouds 2 back. But what I don't think I did do is actually change the seed. So I'm going to change the seed so it's different than the one down there. I'm going to use this one. There we go. So yeah, let's do that. Then we talked about that. Blend, set the copy 0.5. And then here we're using auto levels to get the most out of our crack. Okay, I'm going to stop trying to fix it, but we have another Perlin noise. This one should be set to seed 2 because we already have a seed 1 down there. We blur it a little bit. Always make sure your quality is set to 1 because it does nothing and it just makes you feel better. And everyone I see sets it to 1, so I'm just going to follow along even though I don't see a difference. It must be like a Boolean or something that turns because it's either one or the other. So it must be doing something somewhere for someone. Now we have levels here. And then that's going into the top of this blend, which is set to multiply. And again, this is so that my cracks, you can see that the cracks kind of like fade out here. And it's not all the same height, and that's because of this guy here, so I'm going to turn him off. And then here we're playing around with the how deep the cracks go. And then here we break up the cracks with a vector warp grayscale to 10. That goes into a blend set to multiply, set to 1. Let's stop here and worry about this stuff now. So then let's set these up and then we'll connect them. So on the top we have a histogram select set to these values. And then we have another histogram select set to those. And then we have a subtract. And basically what I'm doing here is I wanted instead of the cracks being on everything, so if we disable this. Oh, yeah, okay. So if we disable it, the cracks are wait a second. Yeah, the cracks are everywhere. And what I'm doing here is a mask to tell the cracks to only be in certain tiles because I don't want all of them to be cracked. And it's hard to tell because of how shallow they are. But if we turn this up, and then hide this, then you can see that all the tiles are cracked. So I'm going to turn this down. What was this? I think it was 0.15. It looks about right. Hopefully that's what it was. Actually, I'll just undo just to make sure. Yeah, sweet. Okay, so yeah, so this is the mask. So this is saying, hey, only crack on these tiles. And originally it was this one, but I thought that there was too many tiles here together. So it would be cracked, cracked, cracked. That's too many together. So I decided to break it up. So I used another histogram select to find a... I just played around with these until I found something where like, oh, those two I can subtract from this. And that's what this is right here. So I subtract these two from these. So then these two disappear and I'm left with this corner guy here. So then the cracked tiles are more spread out rather than all of them being like together, because that looks kind of odd. Okay, so we are actually pulling from the same highway for these two, and that highway is going to be the random grayscale. All right. So now we're going to do the scratchies. I already forget what the scratchies are. Let's turn it on and see. I have no idea what this is. Oh, the scratches generator. Okay, yeah, okay. So this is just scratch marks. Now these are very subtle, but you can see right there, this 1, 2, 3. I'm going to jack them up so you guys can see them better. So 0.0025, so let's just go crazy. So there you can see the scratches. So I'm going to undo that. But let's set this up now. So we're going to start with a scratches generator. Now you can pause the video and look at the settings here. These are all the settings in here. And then we blur them a little bit because I want them to be super harsh. So you can see the difference here, how harsh that is. And I suggest when you're in here, just play around with these. So I mean, they're pretty much, they explain themselves, like spline width, how thick they are, randomness on their thickness, stuff like that. Just check those out. Now here, I double the tiling or increase the tiling because without increasing the spline number or the scratch number, I just, because they're not that noticeable. So I don't worry. I'm not going to worry about the tiling being noticeable. And then I do a multiply again to break up the scratches with this Perlin, and this is coming from the Perlin generator. And then again, I rotate it and I increase the tiling. Then I do a subtract 0.6. And what I do here is similar to what I did before with the surface noise. So last time we used the surface noise was here in the freckles. Actually, did I go over this? I don't think I did. Sorry about that. So here is where we created the histogram scan, and this is where, or maybe I did, and then we blurred it. I know we did that. Oh, yeah, okay, never mind. I did do this. Okay, the continuation, yeah, it went here. So now we're gonna use it again. So we're gonna continue that highway. Go, 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 go. And then here we take a little detour. We go down because this house was in the way. So from here, this is the cracks. They're really hard to see, but they're there. We're going to do a histogram scan and scan the position all the way up to 1. And now we're adding the cracks onto there. Because, okay, let's bring out the paint tool. So let's say that this is my crack. I know it's not perfect, but actually. Okay, let's say this is my crack. And now I want to have a scratch up here. Right now, what the scratch is going to do, it's going to do this. And I don't want that. What I want is the crack to go here. And when it gets to here, it's going to start to fade out, right? Because there's a hole. And then I want it to pick up here. and fade back in, right? Because if you scratch something, that's whatever is scratching isn't going to hit the inside. So we have to account for this. So I am taking the scratch or the crack and I'm adding it to this mask again because if my scratch is going this way, I want it to stop and then like resume down here. But I was a little lazy, so I didn't do that. I just have it so that the scratch fades. It doesn't show up at all in these spots. So we're going to add this scan into here. So we're adding to that mask, and then we're going to continue that mask into here, again into a blur. That way when the scratch starts getting close, this is when it starts to disappear. Instead of suddenly disappearing, it's going to blur into its disappearance. And then you could put a levels here, which I probably should have done. You can put a levels here and then tighten up the, or reduce the amount of like runway, I guess. So it's gonna show up, start to fade, start to fade, start to fade, start to fade, and it's not going to completely fade until it's here where it's the whitest. But with the levels here, you can extend that so that it's gone by the time it gets here. But we're not gonna do that. We're gonna stick to the plan. So we're using that. Let me see if I can show it. So this is 0.0025. So you can see here. Well, actually, this should be less. Maybe I blurred it too much. Maybe it should be like 0.2. But yeah, you can see that the scratch is fading. And I should probably tweak this more so that it's, you know, because the cracks are really shallow, but the shallowness is not really shown here. Because you can see the cracks here are actually super thick. So I probably need to play around with that here by changing the contrast up and then turning down the position. There you go, 0.99. Actually, we can probably play around with this a little bit more. All right, we'll go with 0.99 here. There we go. I could probably spend more time tweaking it, but I'm not going to worry about it. But you get the idea. The concept here is obviously that you don't want that scratch to go to the bottom. But here you probably could just because it's so shallow, but you get the idea. So let's turn this back to, what was it, 0.0025? Like that. Now, obviously, that was one of the shallow scratches. There are some scratches are deeper than others. But yeah, it's good to have that there. All right, so then that goes into the scratchies, blend mode, subtract, and then that's the subtraction of the scratches. So then here we have elevation variation next, and that's just, you know, playing around with the height of the tiles. So some are higher than others. Now, because they are bolted, they are going to be pretty much the same. So it's very, very subtle. You could probably even skip this part if you wanted, but we'll go over it. So you can see how subtle that is. And that's just to add more variation when you're rendering. You don't want everything to just kind of look flat. You want to try and add as much variety as you can. So for this, again, we're going to be pulling from the random grayscale. Into a select, and then into a levels, and then into a multiply. So then we're going from this, where they're all flat, to this, where there's subtly different variation. And obviously the higher this is, the more intense that variation is going to be. But I want it to be very subtle. So, but you know, you can play around with it to your liking. Now same thing here. Now this is for the sloping. Now you can say that some are loose. Some screws are looser on some than on some parts of the tile than others. So you get a little bit of sloping. You can see the difference there. Again, some more variation. Now it's very subtle because obviously you don't want they're bolted, so it's not going to be that much slanted. But we do have some artistic freedom. And again, we're pulling from that grayscale, the random grayscale again. And we're doing a select, and this is for the opacity. Because again, I don't want the sloped tiles to be on all of them, only on some. So it's only going to be on these white ones. And then we're going to pull from the other resident of Flood Philly City, and that is going to be the flood fill gradient. That is going to go to the top. See, right there. And then this is set to multiply, set to 0.2. Again, I don't want it to be super slopey, otherwise it's going to look like that, and that is way too much for them being bolted down or screwed in. All right, I think that marks the end of height. We do reference some of the stuff later on for the color and whatnot. But this should be your end result. It says my recording is like an hour and 11, and I think this probably would have been close to 2 hours if we had done this the normal way, I think. I don't know. You guys let me know how you guys felt. I think I did explain some things probably more than I should have. I think I should probably stop doing that, but I don't know. I guess I try to keep in mind people that are coming in for the first time that probably haven't seen all the previous ones because they probably don't interest them, but they're probably interested in this one. But I don't know. I have to find a balance between newcomers and reoccurring. But anyway, thank you everybody for watching. Let me know what you guys think of this new workflow for tutorials. Hopefully it's faster. Hopefully at least it felt faster. But next will be base color. And I'll see you guys once it loads on the next one for the base color. Bye guys.